Hi, beautiful community. We're going to analyze Steve Witkoff's viral remarks about how Putin commissioned a portrait of Trump and prayed for him without mocking that too much, but actually analyzing it. So I've got a transcription of what Witkoff said to Tucker Carlson, and we're going to read it verbatim, and then we're going to react with a bit of an analysis of Putin, and then an analysis of the way the Trump court works. In the second visit I had, Witkoff tells Tucker, it got personal. President Putin had commissioned a beautiful portrait of President Trump. Now think of this as you're hearing it as language designed to please Trump. President Putin had commissioned a beautiful portrait of President Trump from the leading Russian artist and gave it to me and asked me to take it to President Trump, which I brought home and delivered to him. It's been reported in the paper, but it was such a gracious moment, and he, Putin, told me a story. And here is the story, Tucker. It's about how when President Trump was shot, Putin went to his local church and met with his priest and prayed for the president, not because he could become the president of the United States, and we'll look at why Putin would have prayed for Trump if he actually did pray for Trump, but because he had a friendship with him and he was praying for a friend. I mean, can you imagine sitting there and listening to these kinds of conversations? And I came home and delivered that message to our president and delivered the painting, and he was clearly touched by it. So this is the kind of connection, and Tucker says amen, that we've been able to establish with Putin. This is the kind of connection beautiful community have managed to establish with Putin because they're so skillful. By the way, through something very simple called communication. So, did Putin say this? And if Putin said it, did he lie or did he tell the truth? Did he actually pray for Trump? Now, I am not Margagliotti, and in this sense, it's a blessing because I have a little bit more elbow room to speculate on psychological matters. As a public intellectual and a philosopher behind that, it's not just a right I have, it's also a responsibility I have to you in an age of democratic decline to talk when relevant about psychological features of politicians. So I'm going to absolutely take advantage of that responsibility now and speculate about Putin briefly. Now, Putin is, in my view, too superstitious to have prayed for Trump to win. And Witkoff tried to anticipate this by saying, by the way, he wasn't praying for Trump to win. He was praying for Trump as a friend. Well, we know that their relationship is unequal because Trump idealizes Putin and relies on him for narcissistic supply, while Putin relies on Trump as a subject he can manipulate for actual geopolitical change in the world. But here, what's clear to me is that Putin is incredibly unlikely to have prayed for Trump to win, because Putin would have been too superstitious to do that, thinking not that Trump might not win, but that Trump might win and not be nice to Russia. That thought is sufficiently present in his mind for it to be just unrealistic that he would pray for a Trump victory. He'd want a Trump victory. He clearly wanted a Trump victory in 2024, whereas in 2016, Putin wanted a weakened Hillary to win. But he wanted a Trump victory in 2024. Part of the reason that they wanted a weakened Hillary is that they actually didn't think Trump could win. But if that's not a reason to pray, and Putin did indeed pray, if he did indeed pray, why would he have prayed? Here is why I think he would have prayed. And there can be a plurality of causation there psychologically, but I think that's the main factor. Putin would have been very triggered by what happened to Trump, the attempted assassination attempt. And he is anyway persecuted by OCD type thoughts, neurotic type thoughts about what if physically something happens to me, either just happens or my regime collapses and then it happens. And so that event would have added an extra plate on top of all the plates that Putin is holding that are labeled neurosis, that something Gaddafi-like happens to one. And then he would have needed to put that plate down. And the way to do it is to pray for Trump while being motivated, however, by the thought that he's in a certain relationship of solidarity with Trump, not because he knows or cares about Trump, but because Trump just happens to be an instantiation of a strong man whose life is always, right, potentially at physical risk. You might say, no, Trump is the president of a democratic country, even if he is democratically destructive. Yes, but here that's irrelevant. What's relevant is the psychology. Trump is one of the strong men in Putin's eyes. And therefore, you don't want a world in which too many bad things happen to strong men if you're a strong man yourself. So this is a sort of, crossing and recrossing of fingers and toes about one of the possible universal fates for strong men that floats around history and floats around the globe, not coming for Putin, having almost come for Trump. That would be the psychology. And that's an entirely plausible reason for Putin's prayer, right? Enough. Now, Witkoff. Why is Witkoff speaking like a 4-year-old? The most beautiful picture, the best artist, church, friendship. Is that because Steve is 4? Or because his audience, the orange audience, is 4 years old? And it's primarily the latter. Trump's acolytes know that they only get to speak on TV if they say pre-vetted things or things they're highly confident Trump would approve of. If they don't do that, they no longer get to go on TV. This raises a bigger issue about the extraordinarily disbalanced informational environment that Trump is in, right? Because he only receives information he wants to hear. He throws tantrums when information is produced around him that he doesn't like, even if it's by way of passive consumption, right? These reports of Trump being in the green room and not liking that CNN was vaguely in the background. Even as far as brief passive consumption goes, I don't want to see or hear stuff I don't like. And so it's difficult because staff and allies are basically not allowed to contradict him. Now they can, but it always comes at a significant cost. And therefore you can't plan coherently for alternative future scenarios unless they happen to be scenarios to which Trump is emotionally open already. That's what we saw as Michael Wolff alleges with Trump's determination that his team only focus on Josh Shapiro as the candidate to run with Kamala Harris. And Trump's team, according to Wolff, wanted to focus on others, but felt unfree to do so because Trump was obsessed that he could lose to Shapiro if Shapiro runs, and that's what we've got to focus on and nothing else. So all the planning, right, is at risk of needing to be in the orbit of Trump's emotional state. That's a problem, right? If you are the presidential administration and your strategic reasoning has to be constrained by the orbit of Trump's emotional state, right? It's a kind of bubble of narcissism fueled unreality we discussed on the main channel. Now, a quick remark about Putin. Putin has bigger tools in his toolbox to use on Trump. But what's embarrassing about this Witkoff clip that's gone viral, is how simple right? The tools that Putin is using they're flattery and symbolic gesture. And he will wheel out more complicated tools, but the impression we're getting at the moment is he doesn't have to for now. It's also worth commenting, of course, that MAGA is not necessarily pro-Putin. Trump is more pro-Putin on average than MAGA. MAGA is post-truth in many respects. And that allows us to be pro-Putin and not pro-Putin at the same time. But it's interesting that there is this gap between Trump and MAGA. And so a question arises, is Witkoff in part speaking like this to send a signal to the MAGA sphere that, guys, have got to start thinking about Putin more positively? And the answer to that is no, that's not mainly what he's doing. He's mainly speaking to Trump. That may play a role, but fundamentally that's not the main purpose here. The main purpose of what Witkoff is saying is that it's addressed to Trump, and that Trump hears it and Trump likes it. And of course there is this extraordinary discussion by Michael Wolff and the other biographical commentators on Trump, of which Wolff is the best psychologically. It's easiest for him to access the sort of thing we did on the main channel than it is for Maggie Haberman or Bob Woodward. But what is interesting is this sort of startling illustration of what we're saying with the young woman who's called the human printer, who allegedly is in proximity with Trump, with a portable printer in the bag, printing out positive news for Trump, about Trump, and writing him devotional letters as well. So we've got this constricted and warped informational environment that means that tactical and strategic thinking has to be constrained by Trump's emotional state. And we've also got a kind of a court situation, a monarchical court situation. Not a monarchical court situation at the sense of how Trump understands his political legitimacy. That's true too, but that's another conversation. What kind of authoritarianism does Trump represent? But we can talk about monarchism here in the cartoonish sense of there being a court of different figures jostling for Trump's attention and approval in a distorted informational environment. Now, of course, that means we can expect conflicts in the near future in Trump's court, and we can still plausibly expect a Trump-Musk conflict, not just because Trump is focused on the human factor in politics in a way that Musk can't see, thereby making it likely that Musk will think that something obviously needs to be done and Trump will see it as impossible. But also because there are people in Trump's administration who have a very different political leaning and affiliation to Musk on several key issues, including China. But that's enough of a dance around this Witkoff remark. I hope this was of value, and I think it's right to do this speculative stuff because you've got to be faithful to the reality of what's going on, right, in a center of power that's impacting not just American life but global affairs. Lots of love.